Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton won his runoff election in the Texas Senate primary race. This was against Senator John Cornyn, and Paxton, backed by President Trump, won with over 60% of the vote. So he did very well. So Cornyn is one of several incumbents we know now who have lost primary challenges. So it really honestly has not been a good year for the incumbents. And you might be wondering, as you mentioned, as I just mentioned, why are we talking about Texas? Well, we just wanted to look ahead to see what this could mean for the midterms potentially in November. So to help us do that is University of Minnesota political science professor Catherine Pearson joining us now. Catherine, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Yeah, let's talk about this because it was an interesting night. And this is the big headline, I think, that came out of last night, of course, Paxton and Cornyn. So Cornyn, first Texas senator to lose his party's nomination for re-election. What do you make of what happened in Texas last night?
Well, it was striking. Cornyn was in the Senate for 24 years. At one time, he was a party leader, and he was a pretty conservative Republican. And unlike some of the other Republicans who have lost in primaries recently, Cornyn was generally a pretty loyal Trump ally. So, for example, in Louisiana, Senator Bill Cassidy lost. Well, Cassidy had voted for the second impeachment against Trump back in 2020. Cornyn did not. But at the 11th hour, President Trump endorsed Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and that really made a huge difference with the Texas Republican electorate, even as Ken Paxton has a lot of baggage. And the margin, as you mentioned, was 64 to 36, just really a striking defeat for Cornyn.
Yeah, Paxton coming away with those big numbers. When we maybe step back a little bit and look at who came out to vote, would these be big Trump supporters then?
Absolutely. And it's clear that Trump's endorsement at the 11th hour for Paxton made a critical difference in this race. This race had come into a runoff because there had been three candidates, and at that point, Cornyn had a narrow lead. Trump endorsed Paxton, and even with Paxton's baggage, he won in sort of a striking blow to Cornyn, which makes Texas in play in the general election. It's still a Republican state. It went for Trump by almost 14 points, but as Hispanics have been less supportive of Trump in recent months, it does mean that Republicans will have a harder time holding on to this seat than they would have had Cornyn won.
Yeah, Catherine, I just wanted to look at a couple of other states here really quickly just to sort of give a better perspective. So Representative, for instance, Massey lost in Kentucky to a Trump-backed challenger. Senator Bill Cassidy lost in Louisiana to a Trump-backed challenger. It looks like Trump's influence, on the GOP side remains very strong. What do you think that this could mean for November when we look ahead?
Well, that's right. And so I think that reliable Trump supporters will be motivated to get out and support Paxton. But the question is, what will Democrats do? Will they be more mobilized because Paxton is on the ballot? And even more critically in Texas, what will independent-minded voters do? Voters that may have potentially supported Cornyn, but now that it's Paxton versus the Democrat, James Tallarico, it might be more of an open question. And so this campaign will be competitive. We're already seeing a lot of advertisements. We saw record spending in this Republican primary, and the Democrat, James Tallarico, is already running ads against Paxton after last night. And so I think it will be a competitive race, even as Republicans have an edge in Texas.
Yeah, the ads start early. I'm always amazed about how quickly they turn those things around. Catherine, let's talk about the president for a second, since, of course, he's a big part of this conversation. But looking at his approval polls, and they have his approval rating at about, I looked this morning, it's at about 38%, and about 60% disapproving. What do you see when hearing those numbers, and how does that align with his endorsed candidates winning some of these races?
Well, historically, the president's party typically loses seats in the midterm election. And the more unpopular a president is, and it also depends on economic conditions, the more seats that the president's party loses. And so those low numbers for President Trump definitely spell sort of, concern for Republicans. Add add to that, midterm elections tend to be lower turnout events than presidential elections. And so I think that despite the fact that these candidates who are winning Republican primaries, defeating incumbents, are sort of very popular among Republicans, that's not the general election electorate. And so I think that this could be challenging for Republicans, more so than if some of these incumbents won. I look back to 2022, and Trump made some critical differences in Republican primaries with his endorsement. I'm thinking about Herschel Walker in Georgia, for example, and that did not help Republicans in general elections. And so there's the possibility that this dynamic is repeated.
Catherine, I'm so interested while listening to you about how your research goes when looking at other places. Of course, a political science professor at the U of M, but I'm curious of how your workflow goes when you look at some of these races.
Well, it's certainly an interesting cycle, but one of the other features of modern times is that we have a highly polarized electorate. So there are not very many people who sort of don't know if they're going to vote Democrat or Republican. There are some independents, but for the most part, the voters that show up in November will identify with one of the two parties. And so part of the question is which party is better able to mobilize their voters. Democrats will, of course, be running against President Trump, even though of course, he's not on the ballot, and Republicans will be defending his record, including some new Republicans into the fray with some of these defeated incumbent legislators.
All right, we'll see what happens, Catherine. We really appreciate your time and your insight. This was really interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Yeah.